from the blog Handmade Farmhouse, and today I wanted to bring you along in the kitchen as I make a batch of easy homemade breadsticks. These are so delicious, they're easy to make at home, and they go with a variety of different meals that you can make throughout the fall and winter, like spaghetti, lasagna, and a whole bunch of soups that you'll be enjoying over the next few months. If you are new to bread making, don't be afraid to try this recipe. It's really simple, it doesn't take long at all, and pretty soon you'll hear your family running to the kitchen to devour these delicious homemade breadsticks fresh out of the oven. This recipe is really super simple. It only requires flour, salt, sugar, water, and yeast. And I will link my favorite yeast that I use in all my bread in the description, so that if you're kind of new to bread making and yeast makes you nervous or it's intimidating, this is my go-to that works well every time. And my bread always comes out with this delicious flavor and is really soft and chewy. So I'm going to take you along step by step as we make these breadsticks, and I'll show you everything to so that you can hopefully have a successful time making homemade breadsticks too, for your dinners and for your family. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Okay, I'm going to start by adding 1.5 cups of warm water, and you want this to be pretty warm but not hot so that it doesn't kill your yeast. And then we're gonna go ahead and put our yeast in. I'll have all of the recipe measurements in the blog post. And this recipe does have sugar in it. I'm not gonna pour all the sugar in just yet, but I'm gonna do a little pinch full, because sugar really helps yeast grow and it encourages it to bloom. So once we put the yeast, sugar, and water together, we're just gonna run the mixer for a couple of minutes until everything's incorporated. And then we're gonna allow it to sit and kind of bubble. And that's how you know the yeast is activated. So let's go ahead and give it a couple minutes to do that, and then I'll show you what it should look like when your yeast is nice and activated. And you wanna make sure that that step gets done right, because that's the step that can really make or break the texture of your bread. So we wanna make sure and we give it the patience that we need to make sure that that yeast is nice and foamy and activated before we add in anything else. Okay, so as you can see, our yeast has been sitting for 5 to 7 minutes, and you can see that it's activated and foamy. If at this point your yeast is not looking like it's doing anything, you could probably dump it out and start over, because if the yeast is not activated, it could be because the water wasn't warm enough, or it could be because it was too hot and it killed it. Typically, I find people just don't get it warm enough. So give it a solid 5 to 7 minutes and make sure it's looking nice and activated, and then you can go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients. So I wanted to also tell you guys, I find that it helps to have a nice flour sack towel while you're baking bread. Even after you're just trying to activate the yeast, to cover it up with a flour sack towel, kind of allow that heat to stay in there. I find that that really helps when the yeast is activating. So next we're going to add our sugar, and we're gonna start adding in our flour. Grab my cup. And at this point, I will add in the salt. Salt can kill yeast, so you want to make sure and not add that in until after some of the flour has been in it. I'm going to just finish up adding the rest of my flour and let that get all incorporated. Then I'm going to sprinkle some flour on the countertop, and we're going to take that dough and put it on the counter and cover it with a towel so that it can rest for 10 minutes. And that's going to allow the glutens to develop in the dough, which will make for a really great chewy texture and also give it a few minutes to rise. So let's go ahead and get to that stage, and then I'll show you what's next. Added in all my flour, I really like to remove my paddle attachment and add my dough hook attachment, because I'm gonna let that run for about 5 minutes on this dough, and suddenly it's going to become smooth and elastic, which also helps develop the glutens and makes this beautiful texture in your breadsticks. So we're gonna go ahead and run that for about 5 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like. You can see after just a few minutes with the dough hook how smooth and elastic that dough is. So I'm gonna pull that out and put a little flour on it so it's not sticky, and then we will let it rest covered with a flour sack towel on this countertop for 10 minutes. Okay, so as you can see, this has been sitting for about 10 minutes and it's definitely risen up a little bit. The dough is very soft. So I'm gonna roll this out into a large square shape and then we're gonna brush it with some melted butter. Okay, so don't worry and don't overstress too much about having your dough be perfectly square shaped, but you just wanna roll it out so that it's about a 1/4 inch thick. And I'm going to brush it with this melted butter. At this point, you can also add garlic powder if you want to make them garlic flavored, but plain is really good too. Okay, so our next step is to fold the upper half of the square down onto the lower half. And then we're going to take a pizza slicer, I think that's the easiest tool to use, to cut in about 1-inch strips across the whole piece of dough. And then I will show you how to twist these up and turn them into little breadsticks for our sheet pans. Okay, so what you're gonna do is just make twists out of the strips. And if the ends are long and sharp, which typically they are on the very ends, I just kind of tuck them under. And we're gonna place these on our baking sheets, either sprayed with nonstick cooking spray or with a parchment paper. And then we're gonna brush some more butter on the top. I have now twisted all of my breadsticks and placed them on baking sheets, brushed the tops with butter and sprinkled with kosher salt. I really like using kosher salt over table salt just because it gives it that little bit of crunchy texture on top and makes it seem a little bit more like restaurant quality. At this point, you could also sprinkle on some like ranch powder if you want to flavor them, or you can pop them in the oven, bake them, and just before they come out of the oven, you could sprinkle some Parmesan cheese on top. So these are really versatile and so delicious. I know you're gonna love them. So these guys are gonna rest for about 20 minutes while I preheat the oven to 400 degrees, and that will help that yeast activate even more. It's gonna make them be able to rise up nice and puffy in the oven, and they're gonna double in size. Just look at these delicious homemade breadsticks. They are so beautiful and will make a great addition to our garden minestrone soup tonight for dinner. I know you will love them if you make them and share them with someone that you love, and I can't wait to hear from you and hear what you think if you try them out. I hope, even if you're a new baker, that you will give these a try, because as you can see in only a few simple steps, they were really easy to make at home. So I hope that you love this recipe as much as we do.